The thunder crashed across the Montana sky as Beatrice Harper clutched her younger sister's trembling hand. The two of them huddled beneath a lone cottonwood tree that offered little protection against the merciless downpour of 1878. What had begun as a confrontation with their cruel stepbrother had ended with them abandoned miles from home as punishment for Beatrice's defiance, left to the mercy of a spring storm that threatened to wash away everything including their lives. "We can't stay here, Constance," Beatrice shouted over the howling wind, her soaked calico dress clinging to her shivering frame. At 22, she had spent the last 5 years since their father's death protecting her now 18-year-old sister from their stepbrother's increasing cruelty. "The creek's rising. We need to find higher ground." Constance's blue eyes widened with fear. "But which way, Bea? I can't see anything through this rain." The question hung between them as lightning split the sky, illuminating the flooded terrain. Their stepbrother Thomas had driven them far from town in the wagon, tossing their single carpetbag onto the muddy ground before whipping the horses to leave them stranded. His final words still burned in Beatrice's ears. "Fathers will be damned. I won't have defiant women beneath my roof. You can return when you've learned your proper place." All because Beatrice had stood against his plan to marry Constance off to the elderly, widowed banker who'd been eyeing her sister for months. Another crash of thunder made Constance shriek, and Beatrice pulled her sister closer. The rain had soaked through to their skin, and the temperature was dropping rapidly with the coming nightfall. Hypothermia would claim them if they didn't find shelter soon. "Come on," Beatrice urged, grabbing their waterlogged carpetbag. "There's a ridge over there. Maybe we can—" Her words died as her foot slipped on the mud-slicked incline. Constance screamed as both sisters tumbled down the embankment toward the surging creek below. Beatrice felt her ankle twist beneath her, pain shooting up her leg as they crashed to a stop just feet from the roiling water. "Bea, your ankle!" Constance cried, trying to help her sister stand. Beatrice bit back a sob of pain. "It's just twisted. I can still—" A new sound cut through the storm, the pounding of hooves and the creak of wagon wheels. Through the curtain of rain, a large figure on horseback emerged, followed by a covered wagon. "Hello there," a deep voice called out. "You folks need help." Relief and wariness battled within Beatrice's chest. In these parts, strangers could be either salvation or danger. The rider dismounted, revealing a tall man with broad shoulders, his face shadowed beneath a wide-brimmed hat. As he approached, Beatrice could make out a strong jawline darkened with stubble and concerned eyes that seemed to assess their situation quickly. "Name's Benjamin Archer," he called, keeping a respectful distance. "I've got a ranch about 3 miles north. Not safe for you ladies out here." Beatrice tried to stand, wincing as her ankle protested. "I'm Beatrice Harper, and this is my sister Constance. Our kin left us here. We have nowhere to go." Benjamin's expression darkened momentarily before he nodded. "The creek's rising fast. We need to move now if we're going to get out safely." He glanced at Beatrice's ankle. "You're hurt." Before she could protest, he'd crossed the distance between them and knelt beside her, examining her ankle with surprisingly gentle hands for a man of his size. "Not broken, but you won't be walking on it," he said decisively. "Pardon my forwardness, Miss Harper, but we don't have time for propriety." In one smooth motion, he lifted Beatrice into his arms. She gasped, instinctively gripping his shoulders for balance. Despite the rain, she could smell leather, horses, and pine smoke on him. "Constance, grab your bag and follow us to the wagon," he instructed, carrying Beatrice with apparent ease. A young man with similar features to Benjamin, clearly a relation, waited with the wagon. "Found him, Ben? Ma's gonna have your hide for being out in this weather." "Would have had my hide worse if I'd left folks stranded," Benjamin replied, carefully setting Beatrice on the wagon seat. "Daniel, Help Miss Constance up, then secure their bag. Within minutes, they were moving through the storm, Benjamin on horseback leading the way while Daniel drove the wagon with the sisters huddled beneath a heavy oilskin tarp. "Your brother seems kind," Constance whispered, her teeth chattering. "Cousin," Daniel corrected with a friendly smile. "Ben's the closest thing I've got to a brother, though. Been with him since my parents passed in '73. Beatrice pulled the tarp tighter around them. "You're fortunate to have kin who cares." Daniel's expression grew solemn. "Ben says good family's the only treasure worth having in this life." The journey seemed endless through the storm, but eventually, the silhouette of a substantial ranch house appeared through the rain. Several outbuildings surrounded it, and a barn stood nearby, lamplight glowing from its windows. Benjamin dismounted quickly, helping first Beatrice and then Constance down from the wagon. "Daniel, stable the horses. I'll get the ladies inside." Once again, he lifted Beatrice without hesitation, carrying her up the steps to the covered porch while Constance hurried alongside them. The door swung open before they reached it, revealing a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and Benjamin's same serious eyes. "Benjamin Archer, what in heaven's name?" Her words trailed off as she took in the two drenched women. "Lord have mercy. Bring them in immediately." The warmth of the house enveloped them as Benjamin carried Beatrice across the threshold. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, a hearty fire already blazing within it. He set her gently in a rocking chair near the fire before stepping back. "Found them by Copper Creek, Ma. Their kin abandoned them in the storm. Miss Beatrice has injured her ankle." The woman's face tightened with anger before softening as she approached the sisters. "I'm Martha Archer, Benjamin's mother. You poor dears are soaked to the bone." Within the hour, Beatrice and Constance found themselves in dry clothes borrowed from Martha, their wet garments hanging by the fire to dry. Beatrice's ankle had been wrapped and elevated, a cup of hot tea warming her hands. Benjamin had excused himself to help Daniel with the horses, but not before stoking the fire even higher, making the hearth blaze with welcoming warmth. "Your son saved our lives," Beatrice said quietly to Martha as the older woman settled a quilt around Constance, who had fallen asleep on the small settee. Martha smiled softly. "Benjamin has always had a keen sense for when he's needed. His father was the same way before the fever took him 10 years back." She studied Beatrice carefully. "Now, dear, when you're ready, perhaps you might tell me how two proper young ladies came to be abandoned in a storm?" Beatrice looked down at her tea, shame and anger warring within her. "Our father died 5 years ago, leaving us in the care of our stepbrother Thomas. He's been difficult since inheriting the property. Today, he wanted to force Constance into a marriage with a man 3 times her age." Her voice hardened. "I refused to allow it. He said he was teaching us obedience by leaving us to contemplate our disobedience in the storm." Martha's expression grew thunderous. "That man is no kin to you, not in any way that matters." The door opened, and Benjamin entered, bringing with him the scent of rain and horses. He'd removed his duster and hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. His eyes immediately sought out Beatrice, a question in them. "Ladies are settled, Ben," Martha said, rising. "I've put fresh linens in the spare room for them." Benjamin nodded, approaching the fire to warm his hands. "Storm's not letting up. Creek's higher than I've seen it in years." "Then it's Providence that you found these girls when you did," Martha said firmly. He glanced at Beatrice. "How's the ankle?" "Better, thank you," she answered, surprised by the shyness that suddenly overcame her. Something about his direct gaze made her feel seen in a way she hadn't experienced before. "You and your sister are welcome to stay until you decide what comes next," he said. "We don't have much, But what we have, we share. That's very generous, Mr. Archer. But I wouldn't want to impose. Ben, he interrupted gently. Just Ben. And it's no imposition. The Bible says to shelter those in need, and I reckon that's what we're doing. Martha patted her son's shoulder proudly. I've raised him right, even if he does track mud into my clean house. She looked between them with a satisfied expression. I'll see to preparing a late supper. You two get acquainted. As Martha bustled into the kitchen, Benjamin took the chair opposite Beatrice. For a moment, they sat in awkward silence, the crackling fire the only sound besides Constance's soft breathing. Your mother is lovely, Beatrice finally offered. Benjamin smiled, transforming his serious face. She's the strongest person I know. Kept this ranch going after Pa died. Refused all offers to sell. He looked around the room with evident pride. Everything we have, we built together. It's a beautiful home, Beatrice said sincerely. What about yours? Where's home for you and your sister? Beatrice's smile faltered. I'm not sure anymore. Legally, everything belongs to Thomas now. We have a small inheritance from our mother, but Thomas controls it until we marry. Benjamin frowned. That doesn't seem right. It isn't, Beatrice agreed, surprised by her own candor with this near stranger. But that's the law. Women have few rights when it comes to property. A bad law is still a bad law, Benjamin replied, his jaw set firmly. A man who leaves women to die in a storm has no business calling himself kin. The conviction in his voice warmed Beatrice more than the fire. Not all men think as you do, Mr. A.R. Ben. Maybe they should, he said simply, then changed the subject. You'll stay at least until your ankle heals. After that, we can discuss what comes next. Over the next week, the storm finally broke, but the damage to the surrounding area was extensive. The creek had overflowed its banks, washing out the main road to town and isolating the ranch temporarily. Benjamin rode out daily to check on neighboring homesteads and their cattle, often returning mud splattered but satisfied that their animals were safe. Beatrice found herself watching for his return each day, enjoying the way his face lit up when he shared stories of the day's work with her. Her ankle improved enough that she could move around with the aid of a walking stick Benjamin had carved for her, intricate leaf patterns decorating its handle. Constance quickly became Martha's eager helper, learning to cook and sew with an enthusiasm she'd never shown for the more refined pursuits Thomas had insisted upon. The younger girl blossomed under Martha's practical tutelage, finding purpose in the daily rhythms of ranch life. Your sister has a natural way with things, Martha commented to Beatrice as they watched Constance confidently knead bread dough one morning. She reminds me of myself at that age. Beatrice smiled, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. She's happier here than I've seen her in years. You've been so kind to us both. Martha patted her hand. Kindness costs nothing, dear. Besides, this house has needed young women's laughter for too long. That afternoon, as Beatrice sat on the porch mending one of her dresses, she spotted Benjamin returning earlier than usual. He rode directly to the house rather than stopping at the barn first, dismounting with urgency in his movements. Beatrice, he called, taking the porch steps two at a time. I've been to the Wilsons' place. They had news from town. Her heart quickened. About Thomas? Benjamin nodded, taking a seat beside her. Your stepbrother is telling folks you and Constance ran away in the night. He's painted himself the victim, claiming you stole family heirlooms before leaving. Anger flashed through Beatrice. That's absurd. We had nothing but a carpetbag of clothes when you found us. I know, Benjamin said gently, but he's a man of some standing in town. People believe him. Beatrice set aside her mending, hands trembling with indignation. So we're not only abandoned but now branded as thieves? There's more, Benjamin continued, his expression grave. He's offering a reward for information on your whereabouts. Claims he's concerned for your safety, but he wants to bring us back to control us. Beatrice finished, suddenly feeling trapped. If people learn we're here, they might. Benjamin's hand covered hers, warm and reassuring. No one on this ranch will betray you, Beatrice. Not while I draw breath. She looked up at him, startled by the intensity in his gaze. You barely know us, Ben. Why would you risk so much? He seemed surprised by the question. Because it's right. Because... He paused, conflict evident in his expression. Because in the week you've been here, this house has felt more like a home than it has in years. The admission hung between them, weighted with unspoken meaning. Beatrice felt her cheeks warm, not entirely from the afternoon sun. I should check on Constance, she said finally, rising with the aid of her walking stick. Benjamin stood as well, stepping back to give her space. Of course, I just wanted you to know what we're facing. She paused at the door, turning back to him. Thank you, Ben. Not just for the warning, but for everything. His smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners. You're welcome, Beatrice. Always. That night, after Constance had gone to bed, Beatrice found herself unable to sleep. She wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and made her way carefully downstairs, intending to warm some milk in the kitchen. To her surprise, she found Benjamin sitting alone by the fire, a book open in his lap. Can't sleep? He asked, closing the book. Beatrice shook her head. Too much on my mind. Would company help or hinder? She smiled, settling into the chair opposite him. Company would be welcome. In the soft glow of the firelight, with the house quiet around them, they talked for hours. Benjamin told her about growing up on the ranch, about his dreams of expanding their cattle operation, about the loneliness that sometimes settled over him despite his mother and cousin's presence. Beatrice shared stories of her own childhood, of her parents' loving marriage cut short by her mother's death, of the poetry she secretly wrote when Thomas wasn't watching. I'd like to read your poems someday, Benjamin said, his voice low and intimate in the quiet room. They're not very good, Beatrice demurred. I doubt that very much, he replied. You speak like someone who knows the value of words. Their conversation meandered like a gentle stream, touching on books they'd read, places they dreamed of seeing, hopes they harbored for the future. When the fire began to die down, Benjamin rose to add another log, his movements careful and deliberate. I've been thinking about your situation, he said as he prodded the new log into place, sparks dancing upward. About Thomas and his lies. Beatrice tensed. And Benjamin turned to face her, firelight casting half his face in shadow. You need legal protection from him. As your stepbrother, he has certain rights over you and Constance that give him power he doesn't deserve. I'm well aware, she replied, a note of bitterness creeping into her voice. There might be a solution, Benjamin continued, returning to his seat but leaning forward, elbows on his knees. It's not conventional, and I don't want you to feel pressured in any way. Curiosity piqued. Beatrice studied his expression. What solution? He drew a deep breath. Marriage would remove you from Thomas's legal control. Your husband would have legal standing to protect your interests and your inheritance. Beatrice felt her heart skip a beat. Are you proposing to me, Benjamin Archer? Not exactly, he replied quickly, a flush creeping up his neck. Or at least not as I would have wanted to. This is merely a practical suggestion. You could marry me, and I would sign papers giving you full control of your own property and inheritance. It would be a marriage of convenience, nothing more. Nothing more, Beatrice repeated softly, surprised by the disappointment that flared within her. Benjamin must have heard something in her tone, for he looked up sharply. Unless you wanted more. In time. The vulnerability in his expression made her breath catch. And what do you want, Ben? He was silent for a long moment, the fire popping and crackling in the hearth. I want you to be safe. I want you to be free to make your own choices. His voice dropped lower. And if I'm being completely honest, I want the chance to know if what I'm feeling for you could grow into something lasting. Beatrice's heart pounded in her chest. What are you feeling? Something I didn't expect, he admitted. Something that started the moment I carried you through that storm. The honesty of his words moved her deeply. I need time to think, Ben. This isn't just about me, it's about Constance too. Of course, he said immediately. Take all the time you need. The offer stands, regardless of other considerations. They sat in companionable silence after that, both watching the fire burn down to embers. When Beatrice finally rose to return to bed, Benjamin stood as well. Good night, Beatrice, he said softly. Good night, Ben, she replied, pausing at the bottom of the stairs. Thank you for lighting the hearth tonight in more ways than one. The following days brought clearer weather and drying roads. Benjamin and Daniel worked long hours mending fences damaged by the storm, while Martha began planning a trip to town for supplies once the roads were passable. Beatrice found herself torn between growing attachment to the Archer Ranch and fear of what returning to town might mean. She observed Benjamin with new eyes after their fireside conversation, noting the care he took with all living things, the respect he showed his mother, the patience he exhibited when teaching Daniel new skills. One afternoon, she accompanied him to check on a newborn calf, her ankle now strong enough for short walks. The tender way he examined the wobbly-legged creature, speaking to it in soothing tones, touched something deep within her. You're good with them, she commented as they walked back toward the house. Benjamin shrugged, but his pleasure at the compliment was evident. Animals are straightforward. They respond to kindness and consistency. Unlike people, Beatrice added wryly. Some people, he corrected. Others are just as true as any creature God made. She smiled at that. Are you always so generous in your assessments? Not always, he admitted. But I try to see the good where it exists. And what good do you see in me? The question slipped out before she could reconsider it. Benjamin stopped walking, turning to face her fully. I see courage that doesn't quit. Intelligence that isn't dimmed by hardship. Kindness that extends beyond what's deserved. His eyes held hers steadily. I see a woman I'd be proud to build a life alongside, if she'd have me. Beatrice's heart seemed to stop, then race forward. That sounds less like a marriage of convenience and more like a proper proposal? He finished, a small smile playing at his lips. Maybe it is. Before she could respond, Daniel's voice called out from the direction of the house. Ben, Ryder's coming. The moment shattered, Benjamin's expression immediately shifting to concern. Stay behind me, he instructed, his hand moving instinctively to the revolver at his hip as they hurried toward the house. 3 riders approached the property, dust rising behind them. As they drew closer, Beatrice felt ice flood her veins. It's Thomas, she whispered, gripping Benjamin's arm. The one in the front. Benjamin's jaw tightened. Go inside. Tell Ma and Constance to stay out of sight. Ben, he's dangerous when crossed. I won't let him harm you, Benjamin promised, his voice leaving no room for argument. Go, please. Reluctantly, Beatrice hurried to the house, warning Martha and a terrified Constance. From the window, they watched as Benjamin stood on the porch, Daniel flanking him, as the riders approached. Thomas Harper dismounted first, his expensive suit and slicked-back hair a stark contrast to Benjamin's practical ranch attire. The 2 men with him remained mounted, hands resting near their weapons. "I'm looking for my sisters," Thomas called out, his voice carrying the affected refinement he'd adopted since inheriting their father's money. "I have reason to believe they may have sought shelter here after foolishly running away during the storm." Benjamin's stance remained relaxed but alert. "Don't believe I've had the pleasure of meeting your sisters, Mr. Harper." Thomas Harper of Silverdale Creek. The name was delivered with the expectation of recognition. Beatrice and Constance Harper. Young women, one with dark hair, one fair. "Afraid I can't help you," Benjamin replied evenly. "Just my mother, cousin, and me on this property." Thomas's expression darkened. "I've been told by reliable sources that 2 women matching their description were seen being brought here during the storm." "Your sources are mistaken," Benjamin said. "Now, if that's all, we have work to return to." Inside, Beatrice held Constance's trembling hand, watching the confrontation with growing dread. "I insist on searching your property," Thomas demanded, taking a step forward. Benjamin's hand settled more visibly on his revolver. "And I insist you leave my land, Mr. Harper. You have no authority to search private property." The tension stretched between the men, neither willing to back down. Finally, Thomas's gaze shifted to the house, scanning the windows. Beatrice ducked back quickly, but she feared he might have caught a glimpse of movement. "This isn't over, rancher," Thomas said coldly. "Those girls are my legal responsibility, and harboring them is against the law. Threatening honest folk on their own land is also against the law," Benjamin replied. "I suggest you remember that." With a final glare, Thomas remounted his horse. "I'll be watching this place. When you tire of hiding my sisters, you know where to find me." The riders departed in a cloud of dust, but the threat lingered in the air. Benjamin waited until they were well away before returning to the house, his expression grim. "He knows you're here," he said without preamble as he entered the parlor where the women waited. "He doesn't have proof yet, but he suspects." Constance began to cry softly. "He'll force me to marry Mr. Davenport. I'd rather die." Martha wrapped a comforting arm around the younger woman. "No one's forcing you to do anything, child. Not while you're under this roof." Beatrice looked to Benjamin, finding his eyes already on her. "We've brought danger to your home. Perhaps we should leave, find somewhere further away." "No," Benjamin interrupted firmly. "Running now would only confirm his suspicions and put you at greater risk." He crossed the room to stand before her. "There's another way if you're willing." Understanding dawned in Beatrice's eyes. "The solution you mentioned before." He nodded, then to her surprise, lowered himself to one knee before her, taking her hand in his. "Beatrice Harper, I know this isn't the romantic courtship you deserve, but I'm asking you to marry me not just for protection, but because I believe we could build something real together." Constance gasped, while Martha pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes shining. Beatrice stared down at Benjamin, emotions washing over her in waves. Fear of Thomas, gratitude for Benjamin's protection, and something deeper that had been growing since he carried her through the storm. "Are you certain?" she asked quietly. "This isn't just duty talking?" Benjamin smiled up at her, squeezing her hand gently. "Duty might have made me offer, but it's not duty that makes my heart race when you enter a room. It's not duty that has me thinking about you when I should be focusing on ranch work. And it's certainly not duty that makes me want to build a future with you by my side." Tears filled Beatrice's eyes. "Then yes, Benjamin Archer, I will marry you." His face broke into a radiant smile as he rose, pulling her gently to her feet and into his arms. The embrace felt like coming home, like finding a place she belonged after years of uncertainty. "Well, praise the Lord," Martha exclaimed, wiping tears from her own eyes. "Daniel, ride for Pastor Miller immediately. We'll have this wedding before that snake Thomas can slither back here with more trouble." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Pastor Miller had arrived the previous evening, staying overnight to perform the ceremony. Martha had pulled out her own wedding dress, altering it quickly to fit Beatrice, while Constance wove wildflowers into her sister's hair. "Are you nervous?" Constance asked as they prepared in the upstairs bedroom. Beatrice considered the question carefully. "Not about marrying Ben," she replied honestly. "Only about what Thomas might do." "Benjamin won't let him hurt us," Constance said with surprising confidence. "And neither will Martha or Daniel. We have a family again, Bea. A real one." Tears threatened again, but Beatrice blinked them away. "When did my little sister become so wise?" Constance smiled. "When I watched my big sister stand up to Thomas to protect me. You taught me what courage looks like." The simple ceremony took place in the Archer's parlor, sunlight streaming through the windows and illuminating the small gathering. Daniel stood as Benjamin's witness, while Constance stood proudly beside Beatrice. Martha played the small organ in the corner, filling the house with joyful music. When Benjamin took Beatrice's hands in his eyes never left hers. "I, Benjamin Archer, take thee, Beatrice Harper, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I promise to protect you, provide for you, and partner with you in all things. I vow to respect your mind, cherish your heart, and honor your spirit for as long as we both shall live." Beatrice's voice was steady as she spoke her own vows. "I, Beatrice Harper, take thee, Benjamin Archer, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand by your side in all seasons, to share in your joys and sorrows, to build our home with love and laughter. I vow to be your equal partner, your trusted confidant, and your faithful companion for as long as we both shall live." Pastor Miller pronounced them husband and wife, and Benjamin leaned down to kiss his bride with tender reverence. As their lips met, Beatrice felt the final pieces of her fractured world coming together, forming something new and beautiful. The celebration that followed was simple but joyful. Martha served a special meal, and Daniel played his fiddle while they danced in the yard. Benjamin never strayed far from Beatrice's side, his hand often finding hers as if reassuring himself that she was real. As evening approached, Martha shooed the newlyweds toward the small cabin that stood a short distance from the main house. "Benjamin built it himself last year," she explained to Beatrice. "Said he wanted to be prepared when the right woman came along. Seems Providence was guiding his hands." The cabin was modest but beautifully crafted, with a stone fireplace dominating one wall. Benjamin lifted Beatrice across the threshold, setting her gently on her feet before turning to light the hearth. "Welcome home, Mrs. Archer," he said softly as the fire caught and began to glow. Beatrice moved to stand beside him, watching the flames grow stronger. "Home," she repeated, testing the word. "I'd almost forgotten what that felt like." Benjamin's arm slipped around her waist, drawing her closer. "I promise you'll never forget again." She turned in his embrace, reaching up to touch his face. "I married you for protection, but that's not why I'm standing here now." "Why are you standing here?" he asked, his voice low and filled with hope. "Because in the span of 2 weeks, you've shown me more kindness, more respect, and more understanding than I've known in years," she answered. "Because when you look at me, I feel seen. And because I think I might be falling in love with you, Benjamin Archer." His smile was radiant as he lowered his forehead to rest against hers. "I know I'm falling in love with you, Beatrice Archer. Have been since I carried you through that storm." Their second kiss was deeper than their first, filled with promise and belonging. Outside, the last light of day faded, but inside their cabin, the hearth burned bright, casting golden light across the beginning of their life together. 3 days later, Thomas returned with the sheriff and a legal document claiming guardianship over the Harper sisters. What he found instead was Beatrice Archer, legally married with documents signed and witnessed, and Constance Harper, now legally under her sister's protection as specified in their marriage contract. "This is outrageous," Thomas sputtered, face red with fury. "This marriage is a sham, clearly arranged to circumvent my authority." Sheriff Wilson, who had known Benjamin since he was a boy, looked between the furious Thomas and the calm, united front of the Archers. "Papers look legal to me, Harper. Pastor Miller's signature and everything. I demand they return to town with me immediately. There are still charges of theft to be addressed." Benjamin stepped forward, his voice level but firm. "Mr. Harper, my wife and her sister arrived here with nothing but a single carpetbag of basic necessities. If you persist in these false accusations, I'll be forced to file countercharges of endangerment and abandonment." The sheriff raised his eyebrows. "Abandonment, you say?" "He left them miles from town during the worst storm we've had in years," Benjamin confirmed. "They nearly drowned in Copper Creek before I found them." Thomas's face paled slightly as the sheriff turned a questioning gaze on him. "That true, Harper?" "They ran away," Thomas insisted. "I went looking for them." 3 days later, Constance spoke up, finding her voice. "After leaving us to die in the storm." The sheriff sighed heavily. "Seems to me we have a situation with conflicting accounts. But one thing's clear, Miss Constance is now legally under her sister's protection, and Mrs. Archer is no longer subject to your guardianship, Harper. Unless you have concrete evidence of theft, I suggest you drop this matter entirely." Thomas glared at Beatrice with undisguised hatred. "This isn't over. That inheritance is rightfully mine." "Actually," Benjamin interjected, producing a letter, "we've already contacted the bank about releasing Mrs. Archer's inheritance to her directly. Their mothers will specify it belong to her daughters upon marriage or reaching the age of 25. As Beatrice is now married and Constance is under our protection, the funds will be transferred accordingly." Defeated but still seething, Thomas had no choice but to leave empty-handed. As the dust from their departure settled, Benjamin turned to find Beatrice watching him with a mixture of amazement and affection. "You contacted the bank already?" she asked. He smiled somewhat sheepishly. "Actually, Daniel rode to town with a letter the day after our wedding. I wanted to ensure your independence was secured as quickly as possible." Beatrice crossed to him, slipping her arms around his waist. "Most men would have kept control of that money." "I'm not most men," he replied simply. "And you're not most women." "No," she agreed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him softly. "We're partners, remember? Equal in all things." Benjamin gathered her close, his expression serious. "I meant every word of my vows, Beatrice. This marriage may have started as protection, but it's becoming something much more precious to me with each passing day." "To me as well," she whispered against his lips. "Who would have thought that being cast into a storm would lead me home?" 1 year later, Beatrice stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Benjamin return from the fields with Daniel. Her hand rested on the gentle swell of her belly, evidence of the new life that would join their family in the spring. Constance, now courting Daniel with Martha's enthusiastic approval, waved from the garden where she was harvesting vegetables for dinner. The young woman had blossomed in the freedom and security of the Archer Ranch, discovering a talent for botany that had led to a thriving herb garden with medicinal plants that the town doctor now purchased regularly. As for Thomas, he had eventually sold his property and moved east, unable to face the community after the truth of his actions became widely known. The Harper sisters found they rarely thought of him anymore, too busy building their new lives to dwell on past hurts. Benjamin spotted Beatrice on the porch and quickened his pace, his face lighting up as it always did when he saw her. A year of marriage had only deepened their connection, each day bringing new discoveries about one another, new reasons to be grateful for that fateful storm. "How are my two favorite people today?" he asked as he reached her, placing a gentle hand beside hers on her belly. "We're perfect," Beatrice replied, leaning into his embrace. "Just waiting for you to come home and light the hearth." Benjamin smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Always my love. For as long as we both shall live." As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the extended Archer family gathered around their table, bound not by blood but by choice, by love, and by the storm that had brought them together. The hearth burned bright in the corner, a constant reminder of shelter found, of warmth shared, and of the family forged in its glow.